Welcome back to the Sedona International Film Festival live stream 2020. I'm Tanya June Moore. Thank you so much for watching us, and thank you so much for the Sedona Advertising Agency, Broadcast Rentals, and the Sedona Rouge for sponsoring our media room this year. We really appreciate you. Please introduce yourself and this incredible film.
I'm Jeff Cohen. I'm the co-producer of the Corporate Coup d'Etat. It's about the 40-year takeover of U.S. democracy by giant, politically active corporations.
That's a mouthful. Welcome to the Sedona International Film Festival.
It's great to be here.
You just came off of another festival and you jumped right into our festival. What's the buzz been around your film?
Well, you know, we've been showing this now for a while. It's not a new documentary. I've been going to festivals all over the world and both coasts for almost a year. Mm-hmm. People sometimes find the movie depressing. That's why I've made it my mission to go all over the country with the movie, mm-hmm. because there's so much activism fighting against corporate greed, whether it's young people in the Sunrise Movement want to deal with climate change and they support the Green New Deal, or the teachers' strikes, even in conservative states across the country. There's a lot of activism fighting against corporate power and corporate greed. So that's the message I try to bring in the Q&As after the movie, which is, yes, corporations have too much power in this society, but working class and middle class and poor people are fighting back.
Thank goodness.
Yeah.
Well, let's check out the trailer and
Sure.
get everybody on the same page.
It could be argued that we are now in the midst of a coup d'etat in slow motion. Democracy is weakening, corporatism is strengthening, yet none of us has chosen this route for our society, in spite of which our elites, quite happily, continue down it.
Trump is the symptom, he's not the disease. The corporate coup d'etat was begun in the early 1970s, reconfiguring the global economy into an incredibly wealthy global oligarchic class.
This used to be the pride of the nation. It's gone. It's gone.
I used to wake up in the morning to the noise of the blast furnace rumbling. Now I wake up to them tearing the facility down.
Companies that were nation-state based started to go multinational, then they started to go transnational. The shifting of manufacturing to the global south, where the wages were lower, where the environmental rules were not either existent or enforced.
But the people here, they're hurting. Their jobs are gone. Their jobs are gone.
On paper, there are something like 9,000 or 10,000 registered lobbyists, but in reality, the number is closer to 100,000. Do they have any influence over the vote?
Not on mine.
They're just looting and stealing as fast as they can as everything collapses.
They set the stage for a savior. Obama was supposed to be that savior, and he wasn't. And what happens after a savior fails you, you look to something very different.
Corporations are literally going wild over this.
If Donald Trump goes away, we'll find another Trump. Believe me, we'll find another one.
And the corporate elites, they want to divide us. They want to divide and conquer. It is a strategy as old as the elites who emerged from the cave in the history of the species.
The idea that after an experiment of 150, 200 years of becoming more and more democratic, that we would suddenly slip back into this old authoritarian top-down model, that is very destructive. And you can already see the signs of that destruction in what's happening in our societies.
Does this still light a fire under you to watch that?
It does, and every time I see the movie, it seems more relevant than when we finished shooting in 2018. Mm-hmm. It's so timely. I was just in Canada at the Vancouver Film Festival with John Ralston Saul, He's the philosopher, a huge intellectual, known all over the world. He's from Canada. And he said in 1995, we're in the middle of this coup d'etat. And he thought, this corporate coup d'etat, he thought it was pretty risky to say something like that. And now he says, everyone sees it. You know, what he saw first and talked about all those decades ago has happened.
What are you accomplishing with this film? What do you want people to do?
Well, I think it's sparking activism all over. I mean, we've just released it on DVD and rental, so people are watching it on iTunes now, and they're watching it on Amazon. Not that I'm a big fan of that giant corporation, but so there's no doubt, and there's a bunch of groups that are using it. They're buying the DVDs, they're sending it to their chapters. So there's no doubt that it's sparking activism. I mean, the Hollywood Reporter review called this a horror film of the most realistic kind, and it is horrific, but I think it is leading to people saying, you know, we still have freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. Let's organize and challenge the 1% and restore democracy. A high point of the movie, and is the interviews with all these former union workers in Ohio. They had great jobs, great benefits. Now there's opioid addiction, no jobs, despair, homelessness. And we talked to a bunch of these people who'd voted Democratic their whole lives. They voted for Obama. They voted for Bernie Sanders in the primary back in 2016 rather than Hillary Clinton. And then they voted for Trump. And we asked them why, and they said, well, you know, the Democrats have promised us all this stuff, but they haven't done anything, and so we took a chance with this guy. And it's sort of revealing to look at people who are in such despair. They've lost faith in their union leadership and the Democratic Party leadership, and they went with Trump.
Yes.
And then another high point that this the trailer brings out is Lee Fong, a great young journalist for The Intercept. And he was chasing after these members of Congress on Capitol Hill and these lobbyists and people that used to be in the government and now they lobby for military corporations, and tried to get interviews with them. It's a little bit like Michael Moore's Roger and Me, but that's another high point is we know corporations have too much power, and we sent this journalist in there to see how it's done. And he happened to be on Capitol Hill when the big banks, through their lobbyists, weakened the Dodd-Frank law that was supposed to have some restrictions on Wall Street to prevent the next crash. And we were there when that happened. And about 40 Democrats joined the Republicans to make it happen. I mean, we've got journalists in action. That's another great thing about the movie. Lee Fong on Capitol Hill talking to these lobbyists and these politicians that have been taking money from these corporations. That's priceless. And another is in Ohio, these union workers who'd been lifelong Democrats had voted for Obama and then jumped to Trump. We sent in Philip Martin, an African-American journalist from public radio. He's the one that did all our interviews in Ohio. And we keep trying to ask him to go back to Ohio, even if it's just with your radio, you know, if we can't send a crew, to see where are these people now.
That's my next question.
I get that when people watch the movie, that's usually the first question. I have to say, look, these interviews were shot in 2018. We're not sure where these people stand now.
And I was, you're very, very well versed.
Yeah.
Prediction for what do you think's going to happen?
Well, I'm a critic of big corporations, so I'm a supporter of Bernie Sanders. I've known him since his first term in Congress. He's an old friend of mine. I have no idea. I believe Bernie would have beaten Trump in 2016, and you can look at the numbers and see it's pretty obvious in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio, where they just said she's the candidate of NAFTA. She and her husband brought us the North American Free Trade Agreement, and the jobs went to Mexico. So they really hurt Hillary with NAFTA. Trump did. I think Bernie would have won in 2016. I'm just not sure if anyone can beat Trump this time. I'm disappointed it took Pelosi so long to go to impeachment, and then it sort of fizzled. She should have done that months and months earlier. It should have been about Trump's corruption. You know, he's the only president who refused to divest himself from his businesses. And there's 2 clauses of the U.S. Constitution that say that's unconstitutional. And the Democratic leadership just kept saying, Russia, 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 we're waiting for Mueller, and they focused everything on that. They should have been talking about Trump's corruption being impeachable, because I think he was impeachable from day one. So I believe the Democratic leadership has sort of bungled their opposition to Trump. So that leaves
Some
me.
people would say that was on purpose.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, we know that sometimes when the Democratic leadership does weird stuff, it's because they're getting corporate donations as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're going to have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And if you get out of your Q&A at any point,
right.
we'd love to hear the feedback after your Q&A, because this is a town that is, this will spark a lot of conversation.
I appreciate it.
So thank you for bringing
Thank
it here.
you.
Thank you for being part of the Sedona
I'm so
International
thrilled
Film
to be in this beautiful town.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Stay tuned. We'll have another riveting filmmaker in our seat after this. Our hashtags this year are Sedona Film Fest 2020 and Sedona Film Fest 26.